Hello, everybody. So, I brought some loneliness with me today. Who would like some? Nobody? Okay. I don't blame you. Loneliness is not considered a good thing. It's not something that we normally choose or want. Now, according to Google, loneliness is a sadness because one has no friends or company. But I don't like this definition because it feeds stigma and false stereotype. As a society, when we hear the word lonely, we often think of that kid back in school who was always on their own, that kid who nobody spoke to and everyone avoided. A part of you was terrified of becoming that kid, but the truth is that he or she exists in all of us. I'm sure we've all had some moments where we felt alone and had no one to talk to, sometimes even when we were surrounded by friends and family. Just a few years ago, I was in a tea shop with my best friend, whose name is Shubham. Now, Shubham is an actor, and this is him on IMDb. But this is what he really looks like. Now, I wasn't in a great place. I was going through a breakup, my startup had just failed, and all my ambitious university friends were getting job offers and moving forwards with their lives. I felt insecure, disconnected, and pretty alone. And that's when it happened. The tea arrived. And as Shubham poured me a hot cup, I realized that I was so exhausted of feeling lonely and depressed. I needed to get out of my own head. And so I took out my notebook, opened up a blank page, and wrote the first line of a haiku. Haiku is a form of three-line poetry that comes from Japan. But instead of finishing the whole haiku myself, I pushed the notebook towards Shubham and asked him to write the next line. He did, and then I wrote the third and final line, and we ended up with something like this. My startup failed, but not as badly as your last movie. For the next few hours, we kept writing together, and I found myself smiling again. It was magical to release my tensions through these little lines of haiku and watch my dear friend take the thoughts in completely new directions. With each line that passed between us, I felt less alone and more connected. The whole experience uplifted me and also changed my perspective on loneliness. Before, I saw loneliness as this dark bag that contained only misery and pain. But now, I see it as a raw material that can be consciously transformed into something more valuable, something like connection, provided you have the right tools. Now, when I looked online, there didn't seem to be any tools that consciously turned a person's isolation into a sense of belonging. And so I decided to build one with my two friends, Andy and Nir. We called it Haiku Jam, and it is a mobile app where you can write poems with strangers around the world. Today, almost 500,000 people from across 120 countries have found connection and belonging in Haiku Jam. We've heard the most amazing stories from our community, and I wanted to share one with you. This is Saad, and he is a 21-year-old refugee from Syria. In 2015, Saad boarded a boat to Europe with 40 other men and women. The journey was extremely dangerous, and Saad nearly drowned along the way. Thankfully, the boat landed safely in Greece, and from there, Saad made his way to the Netherlands, where he was given asylum. he would live in a refugee camp, which was a converted old gym in the city of Rotterdam. A few weeks in, Saad found himself in a really dark place. He missed his best friends, Omar and Jabir, who had been shot dead in the streets of Syria. He worried for his family because they'd been unable to escape and were struggling financially. And he, Saad, was living in a gym in a country he did not understand, with nobody to turn to. He felt so helpless, so broken, and so alone. And a part of him just wanted to end it all. Now, one of the people volunteering at the camp had sensed Saad's pain. Her name was Rose, and she happened to be one of the first members of Haiku Jam. She told Saad about the app, and he started writing. He shared his fears and struggles and was heard by this global family of complete strangers. For the first time since arriving in Europe, Saad felt like a person and not just a refugee. Saad's story quickly spread through Haiku Jam, and our community became determined to help him find connection. Hundreds of people rallied together and published a book called Dear Saad, in which they shared their words of encouragement and support, reminding him that the world still cared. His story even reached the European Parliament in Belgium and sparked a conversation amongst politicians about the horrific realities in Syria and what Europe could do to help. This all happened 3 years ago, and Saad has come a long way since then. Today, he's almost become a European citizen. He's studying information engineering at university, and perhaps most beautiful of all, he's been reunited with his family, and they are living together safely in the Netherlands. It's such an honor to know that Haiku Jam played a role in helping Saad find connection. His journey reinforced my belief that loneliness was a raw material like any other and could be turned into something special. But sadly, not all stories have happy endings, and not all raw materials are used for good. Take uranium, for example. Now, this precious metal can be used to produce an enormous amount of clean energy, which is good for the world, but it has another use case as well. One of the great inspirations in my life was a man named Ravi. He was my dad's childhood friend and also my mentor. When I was 18 years old, just a few weeks before starting university, I received the news. Ravi uncle had committed suicide. He had driven to the outskirts of Bangalore, parked his car, and ingested a poison. It took him 6 hours to die, during which time he looked at printed photographs of his family, his friends, my dad, and me. It turned out that Ravi uncle had some problems in his personal life, and his business was struggling. He felt deeply alone and withdrew into himself. His loneliness became the atomic bomb that ended his life. And this really, really angers me, because in his car, right next to that bottle of poison, was a technology that has supposedly connected the world. There were thousands of contacts on his smartphone, and so many apps that he could have used to reach out to someone, but he didn't. The technology was right there, but he couldn't bring himself to use it. And it's not just him. There was a famous study conducted that asked Americans one question: if you were in a crisis, how many people could you call upon for support? Now, when this study was conducted years and years ago, the most common answer was 5. 5 people. Today, in 2018, the most common answer to this question is 0. So where has modern society gone wrong? How can there be literally millions and millions of ways to connect to each other, and yet we feel more alone than ever before? Why do we seem to be living in this hollow state where we are always online, but not really there for people? And why is it that when we do feel alone, we turn to social media, which often just creates more isolation? Look, these are complex questions, and I don't have all the answers. But I do know that technology has played a role here, and the way we're designing it has to change. Because we don't need more apps for chatting, taking selfies, and presenting the perfectly curated Instagrammable version of our lives. What we need are spaces where we can be vulnerable, share our feelings, and have the conversations that matter. Haiku Jam has taught me that it is possible to take a world of strangers and isolation and turn it into one of friendship and connection. But of course, one project is not enough, because loneliness has become the atomic bomb of our entire generation. And this bomb can only be diffused by us owning the problem together. I feel that the first step is awareness, and seeing this bag of loneliness as just another raw material. Because with the right tools, we can, and we will, turn it into something beautiful. Thank you so much.